Cool. I think we're all set to go, and so we're going to start with the virtual interaction. Like I said, we're going to be talking about our plans for the next 6 months, and particularly for you entrepreneurs, early stage funders, and potential reputation economy architects. This is a great way for you to learn about how you can engage and what mediums we're going to be using over the next 6 months. So I'll get right to it. I'm going to share my screen here so that I can run you guys through a few slides. For the first 25 minutes, I'm going to be sharing what our plans are for Sacred Capital over the next 6 months. And from there, you guys can pick up a few points and put your questions in the Q&A section that is at the bottom. If you see the button, that's what you can select to get your questions answered. Just a minute. I think Rajni, can you mute your mic so that we're good to go? Thank you. Okay, guys, so building the new economy. Some of you have been part of our virtual interactions in the past. I hope you can see my screen. You guys have been part of our virtual interactions in the past, where we've spoken about the promise of the new economy. And obviously, the emphasis now is to move towards how we can build it and giving you guys tangible steps on how to engage. Before I jump into that, I'm going to just list out a few I'm just going to list out a few slides on what Sacred Capital is and what we're really doing here, and that's just to give this context and for those people who haven't been part of our interactions in the past. Now, most of you are tuned into the promise of blockchain technology, of distributed ledgers in particular, and we all know it's moving us to this new paradigm where we're seeing diverse designs for wealth. So in the past, we've only had the luxury of just one kind of wealth, which is material capital. And if you want to buy a house, you want to buy food, you want to buy a car, you can you transact with it using material capital. Obviously, the design for this has been pretty homogeneous, and that's because of the limitations of technology in the past. But distributed ledgers are really giving us the opportunity to create diverse designs. And so what does that mean? It means that communities of people or networks of people, ecosystems can come together and say, hey, this is what we would like to amplify. And let's create a design for this. And now we can maintain a record of it on a distributed immutable ledger, which gives it money-like quality. So a group of people could come together and say, honesty is important to us. I'm getting as intangible as possible. Honesty is important to us. And here's our design for what honesty looks like. And the record of who's honest as per this standard gets maintained on our ledgers, on this distributed ledger. And it could be potentially a form of wealth, a form of money in itself. And this isn't new. Like, I think groups of people or communities or networks have had these designs in different collectives in the past. An app like Uber maintains a record of who's a good driver. A nation maintains a record of who's a criminal and who's a president. Groups of people maintain records of who can be trusted and who cannot. And obviously, we've held these intangible forms of value, but it's now that some of these forms of value are getting more validity because of distributed ledgers. And so we can actually move towards these diverse designs. So where does Sacred Capital really come in? Sacred Capital is building an economic backbone of sorts for the distributed economy, which basically means these different designs of wealth that we've seen. Someone says we're honest and this is our rule for it. But how can it be accepted outside of this ecosystem? Or if an app says you're a good driver, how can that record of how good a driver you are be accepted outside of this ecosystem? Because that's really critical in giving this reputation or this form of wealth validity outside of an ecosystem. And that's where Sacred Capital comes in, because we effectively are creating what's known as a reputation interchange, which allows this one kind of wealth to move to other ecosystems. And so there's entrepreneurs and app creators who create these designs, use this reputation exchange so that their users can import their reputation on diverse designs outside of their ecosystem. And so real quick, again, this is part of our last virtual interactions. I'd recommend going and checking out some of those videos from the past. This is built on the tenets of the reputation economy. There's four fundamental tenets, which we've spoken about in the past, but I want to focus on the fourth one, the last one, because that's what Sacred Capital's reputation interchange has been built on. Fundamentally, reputation can be staked. And this is what gives reputation this real money-like quality, wealth-like quality. And when we speak about engaging with money, staking it in the new economy, this is the crux. And so, say Garnet comes into Singapore and she's new in town and she comes to me and says, what are the nice coffee shops in this town? Or let's say Garnet, let's use a more tangible example. Garnet says to her friends, hey, I've heard about this really interesting virtual interaction on a Saturday morning. I think you should join it. It's got some interesting thoughts on the new economy, and maybe she recommends it to a couple of her friends. Now, her friends join this interaction and think it's not really hot. It's not really great. If that's the case, Garnet's reputation in their lens drops. And so Garnet has lent her credibility to this interaction, and if it's not great, her reputation drops. But if they actually think that it's a fantastic interaction, her reputation in their lens rises. And so in this way, reputation can be powered up or powered down on the basis of what you're lending your credibility to and who you're lending it to. And we say this is a zero-sum economy of sorts, because Garnet could potentially recommend this virtual interaction to a couple of people. She could, send a message out to 100 people. She could go out and tweet it to her million followers. And so in that sense, lending your credibility is not bound by the limitations of the zero-sum game that traditional money holds, because traditional money is limited to material capital. And so if Garnet has 5 pencils, she can only give 5 pencils away. Or if she earns 10 more, she's effectively taking it from someone or taking it from a forest. So that's the limitation of a zero-sum game. And so these economies, reputation economy, fundamentally allows us to break out of those shackles, and that has fascinating possibilities. So from here on, we're going to dive in for the next 20 minutes into what Sacred Capital is enabling, and this is stuff that hasn't been released or hasn't been spoken about outside of our one-on-one interactions. And so we're really excited about this because we're really curious to hear what you guys feel about this and this is going to be a great step for you guys to engage. And so I'm going to start with the architecture of Sacred Capital and how the reputation interchange actually works. And this is crucial for understanding how the reputation economy functions. For some of you, you've heard us talk about Holochain as a pretty breakthrough protocol and a project that has enabled some of these conversations. And I'm going to bring that here. Some of you, I think there's a couple of people from the Holochain community who are on this interaction as well. And so to them, I'm really glad that you're here. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, if possible, later in this interaction. But Holochain enabled this paradigm of a distributed data reality, and that was very critical when it came to reputation, because in the past we've all technology has always been dominated, or the economic paradigm has been dominated by a centralized data reality. So if I, take an example like Facebook, if I like Garnet's picture, or I poke her, or I send her a smile, it's maintained on a central ledger, central database that is maintained by Facebook for us. It's a central snapshot on what is occurring at all points of time. And so it's a massive project in ensuring that there is one central place where all this information is being captured. If, for example, I sent Garnet $3, or if I sent Garnet 3 Bitcoin, there is a central record of these transactions, either in the Bitcoin ledgers, or in government's ledgers, or banks' ledgers. Now that works great when you talk about very tangible material things that are being transferred from one place to another. And that's because if I had to send Garnet $50,000, I need like a very secure central ledger which is maintaining this record of my $50,000 going from me to Garnet. And she doesn't mind. No, I don't mind paying maybe 1% if it's a bank, or maybe 0.01% if it's a cryptocurrency, to transfer resources from me to Garnet. But as we move away from more tangible transfers of value, this starts getting a little more difficult. So, say I smiled at Garnet, or say I acknowledged Garnet's skills as a writer. Some of these forms of value can't immediately be monetized. So, what is the value of that one smile or one acknowledgement that I offered Garnet? We can't monetize it. And so, in that case, we're much better off moving towards distributed data realities, because we're not spending as much of a resource trying to maintain that central reality. So, me smiling at Garnet doesn't need to be information that can be accessed by all. Maybe it needs to be accessed only by 5 people, or maybe 10 people. And that's where distributed data realities really come in. I'd recommend, if this does interest you, checking out resources that have been published by Holochain, because they speak at length about this. That's not the purpose of our conversation. We're going to be talking about the applications of this. Um, and so distributed data realities are built on what is known as a user chain. So Garnet's information is stored on an immutable set of ledgers, um, which which fundamentally belong to her, and they are immutable because she has complete agency over them. And so apps that choose to write over it or write to it have to do so with specific protocol, and Holochain allows for this protocol to be established. And so this is critical, and I've spent about 4 to 5 minutes on this because I think this is important for allowing a reputation to really get the benefits of immutability. Because if we try to replicate this on in the past on for the blockchain enthusiasts out there, if we try to replicate this using Ethereum or maybe an EOS centralized, it's pretty centralized, and so we on this constant clock to try and monetize reputation, whereas that may not always be the case. So that's what a user chain is, and the question now becomes, well, if if data is being stored on the user's chain and they have complete agency over it, um, what's the role of applications? Because we've only seen the role of applications as data storers, or an overarching program which controls what we do. But in this paradigm, apps have to shift their mindsets a bit, and they almost have to think as templates. And so what they're effectively doing is, applications can be thought of as a community of people, an ecosystem, a cooperative, a network, or a traditional app. An app entrepreneur or the collective, the people who run that collective, can say, hey, we propose these sets of rules for measuring honesty. And I use honesty because that's the example that we spoke about earlier. Like, there's a group of 10 people who come together and say, this is how we measure honesty, or maybe this is how we measure punctuality. And they propose these sets of rules, and it's up to the user to accept or not. And so, say Garnet, Pratyush, and I, and Josh, and four of us, Josh, Pratyush, Garnet, and I, have decided these are, we're a collective of 4 people, and this is how we measure punctuality. These are our sets of rules. Now, if a fifth person chooses to come in, they would have to accept these rules before they enter into this ecosystem. And as they enter into this ecosystem, they start, with their activity, start generating a reputation. If you're late for meetings, you stop, you're probably rated 1 star in punctuality. If you're on time more often, maybe someone like Sid is a 4 star or 5 star within the community. And so users start generating reputation within these applications. So where does Sacred Capital come in? Sacred Capital says, well, that's great. And if Maria is creating some kind of punctuality rating within this ecosystem, it's fantastic, but it's limited because Maria can't take this score of hers of punctuality and start moving it outside of the ecosystem. And that's really important, because if any kind of value, any kind of reputation needs to earn monetary status, there need to be network effects that play into it. And so for Maria to hold that 4 star punctuality rating, if it's actually accepted in 100,000 places or 500,000 places, it would allow her to think of this as well, because that's really critical. If I were to hand Rajani $100 bill, if that $100 bill was not accepted in a million places, she would think twice about accepting it and holding on to it. And so these network effects are what the reputation interchange ensures. Because as Maria agrees to place her punctuality rating on the reputation interchange, it allows other apps to pick this up and say, wow, this is an interesting rating, and I think it is a valid indication of punctuality and actually relevant to us. We're going to import this into our ecosystem. And that's how Sacred Capital allows Maria to take reputation from one ecosystem into another. And it's really important here to understand the dynamic. Apps propose this framework, but users are the one voting and staking this. And so the strength of these interconnections, is Maria's punctuality rating acceptable in 50,000 other places, is truly a function of whether Maria is willing to stake that, and not, an app's idea of what is relevant. And we say that's really important because reputation is fundamentally a ground up form of wealth. Like, it can't be orchestrated top down. And there's more about this in the resources that we'll release after this talk, so you can get into that. But this is the fundamental of the reputation economy. And so effectively, we are enabling what is known as contextual chaos. We love this word, and there's a lot here to be unpacked. It's chaotic because it kind of represents the surface of water when there is there's a pebble or a rock that drops into a body of water. There's ripples that are set out. But it's important that these ripples are contextual. So if I've allowed my reputation as a driver to be staked from Uber into Lyft, it is important that my reputation, if I behave, if I don't drive well in Lyft, it actually ripples back into Uber. It shouldn't affect my reputation as an organic food expert, because that's irrelevant. And that's one of the problems we see, because without a formal economy, if there is damage in reputation in one aspect of our life, it often, there's no context to where it should ripple into. So this actually offers formal language for where it should ripple back into. And so in this way, we enable what is known as contextual chaos. More about this in the resources that we release. And so what are use cases? Again, this is stuff we've spoken about in the past, but there's three fundamental use cases. Traditional apps and institutions. So it could be an Uber, it could be government, it could be a large institution that says, hey, wow, this is interesting. We can, if I'm starting an app from day one, I might be Lyft, starting in another taxi driver's app, a new taxi rideshare app rather. I can choose to import driver reputations from in Uber, for example. And if any driver doesn't perform in my ecosystem, they know that their reputation is at stake and actually ripples back into their performance in the Uber ecosystem. You could have governments, creating meta reputations, which can be, imported by thousands of other apps. And so that's great for governments which are trying to track certain performances or maybe status measures of status, like if you're above the poverty line or below the poverty line, and so on. And so I think that's use case number one, which is allowing these institutions to orchestrate multi-dimensional forms of value. The second use case is for people who are looking to drive movements or conversations. Now, one of the problems in the past has been collectives of people that came together to promote good journalism, or maybe good insights into how good a film buff you are, or maybe a nuanced conversation on social justice. This collective has had to sustain themselves or monetize themselves using the material capital layer, which is, okay, maybe you have to sell merchandise, or maybe we have to have membership, or maybe we have to, advertise, use the advertisement services of CSR. But through this, a collective would actually create different kinds of reputation within their own collective. And if it's placed on the reputation interchange, it can actually be, can actually flow out, and with network effects could be a valid form of sustenance in itself. And so if you are a 4-star or a 95 percentile feminist in Rajni's community, that is sustainability in itself. And you don't need to move down to the material capital layer in order to monetize. And that's something we're speaking about. I don't know if Katie is on this call. She's often been speaking about human equity and starting conversations around this. And so one of the things she's exploring is how you could create a reputation for human equity. Third use case for
I
this.
am on.
Hey, Katie, how are you doing?
Hi.
I'm gonna loop you in for this in a bit.
Sure. I'm just muting myself now. Please
go
ahead.
The third use case is for information, an economy for information. Now we all know information is fundamentally doesn't work the same as material capital. Like you can't copy paste a Ferrari. You can't simply copy the code for a house, but you can do that for information related projects. Like the code for Uber could potentially be replicated at the click of a button. And so fundamentally, information has always thrived when shared. Ideas always thrive, but shared. So intellectual capital thrives on a process known as resonance as opposed to scale. So for example, hashtags, and I don't want to reduce this, this conversation around the Me Too movement, but a hashtag thrives because there's no one profiting from the use of it. It actually thrives on what is known as resonance. So as it flows through the network, it actually creates indents and impressions on us, but which can't necessarily be monetized and shouldn't be monetized. And therefore, reputation fabric could hold who is contributing and how much they're contributing to ideas and information as it flows through networks. So these were three use cases of where the reputation interchange and our reputation economy could be utilized. I'm going to shift focus a bit for the next 10 minutes, talk about what we're doing over the next 6 months. And as you can see, around Q2 of 2019, we're going to be going live. And so our network activates, which means our credits activate, our programmatic collective activates, our reputation, like a fundamental reputation block goes live. And I'll talk about what that means. But before that, we're inviting groups of people to engage. So there could be potential Genesis entrepreneurs, I'll speak about that, potential reputation economy architects, as well as average people who are just enthused by what we're doing here. So what are Genesis entrepreneurs? They're fundamentally people who look to create. They're the builders. But they're now looking at different kinds of tools to scale. In the past, as an entrepreneur, you just had one kind of capital to scale stuff, right? You just had money. It could be US dollar or Bitcoin or Ethereum. And as a result of that, within your ecosystem, the only benefit you could offer your users was material capital, because all else wasn't really tangible, right? A user driver rating within Uber only has benefit if you can monetize it more, and so on. And what Sacred Capital is now offering is the opportunity to scale different kinds of value. It could be cultural capital, social capital, information, material capital. And what this means is when you look at building an app or when you look at building a community, you're not just looking at the material capital aspect of it, but you're saying, hey, I can also build and scale and modulate behavior within my community. And so you're looking at this from a multi-dimensional aspect. So over the next 6 months, we're inviting people who are interested in this. And there's a lot to unpack here. Like it's a massive shift in the way we're doing things. And so we don't expect that you know how this works. We don't expect you to say, bam, this is my project, let's get going. We actually think there's a 6-month gestation period here in which we're saying, well, we also may not have all the answers. We actually want to ideate in both new ways of doing things. And so Genesis entrepreneurs, as they contribute, their ideas would also be shared within the ecosystem. And that's an opportunity for you to work with reputation economy architects who would help you, potential funders, other potential users who could be your beta testers. And that's what being a Genesis entrepreneur is about. The way you can engage is by participating in our chat rooms, participating in our interactions, just like these. The next category might be of interest to people Some of them, on this call, we've got Akash and Akshay who, been thinking about this for quite a while. There's Josh also who's on this call. I think there's Mihir as well. There's people, I would say you could think of them as new economy analysts because they're not just thinking about economy limited to material capital, but across these dimensions. So they're the guys talking to entrepreneurs and almost consulting them and actually helping them modulate culture, helping them think across these dimensions. And so if you're an entrepreneur who says, hey, I want to create a nuanced conversation around social justice, well, then in that case, you need to ensure it's more inclusive. Whereas if you want to have a more if you want to have a generic conversation, you can have very low filters. You can tweak what the legacy or the decay of reputation is. You can figure out which ones to import, what weightage to offer them. So there's multiple levers, and it requires people who are not only analytical but also tuned into human behavior. And so that's what we call, people that we refer to as reputation economy architects. And people who will be helping Genesis entrepreneurs orchestrate this value. Over the next 6 months, like I said, we're going to be engaging with these people, and at some point in Q2 2019, there's going to be an activation event, and that's really exciting for us because that's when our reputation block goes live, the interchange goes live, and that involves a bunch of things. And so there's 4 fundamental pieces to this. And people like Pratyush who are on this call are helping us design the programmatic collective, which would go live at that point. There's reputation economy architects, there's Genesis entrepreneurs, active contributors, and early stage funders. So at this point, when we go live, people who've contributed over the last 6 months, their reputation as a result of these contributions would actually be published on the interchange. And at that point, it means that your reputation is open to be staked into other ecosystems and apps that might value this reputation. And so this is an invitation for you guys on this call and who are watching this video to start engaging in this ecosystem as one of the 4, or maybe on multiple levels. You could be a reputation economy architect and an early stage funder, or you might be a Genesis entrepreneur and say, well, I'm actually going to support Sacred Capital by funding them at an early stage because I actually am going to be using their services. You could be an active contributor and a reputation economy architect. And in doing so, it's kind of like contributing to an ecosystem early stage. And so your contributions, because they're tracked on the reputation interchange, it's a form of investing in this initiative. And because whatever your contributions are, they're actually getting tracked and rated by other fellow members of this community. And that's why this invitation over the next 6 months, because we ask you guys to engage in this way. So I've spoken about reputation economy architects and Genesis entrepreneurs. Active contributors are people who pick up tangible projects and execute them within the ecosystem. So it could be marketing, it could be branding, it could be development. And it's very time-based, transactional, and also involves a component of material capital, which is money. And the last category is as an early stage funder. And that's what I'm going to move to, because that's what we promised we're going to speak about over the next 6 months, where we are opening windows for early stage funders. Now, these would be timed windows once a quarter, where people can actually say, hey, I love what you guys are building, and I'd love to be part of this journey. And for that, I think it's important to understand our credit economy, which is what some people term as the business model, where the reputation interchange effectively charges apps and users for computational power on our interchange, and this charging or invoicing sorts is effected using Holochain's accounting system, which allows this to be a really fluid process. And so we've created a Sacred Capital credit, which is a unit of value or utility on this reputation interchange. So as an early stage founder, you're receiving Sacred Capital credits at a significantly early stage, and these sacred capital credits have been designed with the help of David Atkinson, who's been part of the Holochain journey, and who, in line with I would say almost a gold standard, known as the ethical issuance. And there's three principles or three norms to the standard. Number one, it's backed by utility. Number two, and sorry, when backed by utility, I mean it's backed by a promise that you will receive credits for, or a promise that you can actually use this reputation interchange at any point of time. It is a value stable currency in that it promises you distributed immutable computation power. For those looking from an investor's mindset, it's an opportunity to place capital in what is we call value stable currencies and not necessarily pegged to any other fiat currencies. Third, like I said, it allows you to participate in the programmatic collective and actually shape the direction of sacred capital. So,
sorry to interrupt. There's some crackling noise in the background. Something.
Okay. Maybe Garnet, can you mute the other? Maybe Garnet can mute the others in the who are on call. If it continues, maybe you can just message Garnet and she'll take it, try and assist, or maybe it's an issue on my end. But yeah, for people who are interested as early stage funders, I'd recommend tuning into the resources that we're going to release later after this call. There's a bunch of data around this that would be of interest to you. But the emphasis here is that the programmatic collective, and maybe Pratyush can talk about this in a bit, is an intention, is an effort to build sacred capital as a collective, as the name suggests. And so entrepreneurs, reputation economy architects, early stage funders actually have a say in how sacred capital is being built. And that's, we think, really critical when you are building something in distributed economy, because this isn't Sid's pet project to extract revenue from other ecosystems. In fact, it's a collective intention to ensure all our stakeholders are benefiting through this project. And which is why the guiding force or the future path of sacred capital would actually come from the programmatic collective based on what reputation you've owned within this collective. So if you're a Genesis entrepreneur and you've been contributing to this ecosystem, you actually have a greater say in sacred capital's future strategy. And we believe that's really important. And that's why the next 6 months are going to be an invitation for you guys to join our spaces. I'm going to wrap with this, and people who have questions, the Q&A button is a great place for you to ask your questions, so Garnet can pick it up and open up the questions so that can be shared with the larger group here. But this is an invitation for you to join these spaces, and there's multiple ways you can do it, either through these interactions or through a chat rooms. And so those on the call, we're going to be releasing, drum roll, please. Our chat room launches today itself. And so guys on this call, you can actually participate in these chat rooms. You can start asking questions. As you grow through the ecosystem, as your reputation rises through the ecosystem, you can actually start moderating and anchoring these discussions yourself. And this is one way in which we bring out the collective, so that this truly is, a new economy organization, a new economy initiative. And so with that, I'm going to stop. I'm going to pull in other voices from the ecosystem. Maybe first we could go with Pratyush. Do you want to share a little bit about the programmatic collective? And then maybe Katie and Rajni, you could have some of your voices as well. And then, people who keep asking questions, this is a good time to pop in your question in the Q&A section. Yeah, Pratyush, are you on?
Before I share, is there something we can do about the crackling noise, or is it?
We're not sure what the crackling, because I don't think everyone's hearing it.
I know I hear it too, but I don't know how to stop it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's just this background intermittent crackle. I don't know. From chat it seems.
Okay. Let me try a couple of things at my end and see if this works. Okay, but go ahead. I'm going to try a few things at my end.
Sure. So I guess I can share my viewpoint on the programmatic collective, or just loosely using the word community. I think we always had communities. We've existed in communities. And I think this is not something we are trying to do new. We are just now, with the benefit of new technologies, we can actually create communities which are scalable, which can be virtual. And from my lens, I also see that now we can actually interconnect various ecosystems. So if I was part of a community earlier or a network, then all my reputation, all my contribution was limited to that. And if I went to another community or a network, then I usually had to start from scratch unless there was a letter of introduction in the older days, etc. So that to me is one piece around how do we build a community. Second, I think is in the new economy, we are also seeing the rise of new designs for organizations, which will be less of organizations and more of networks, which also means that the fundamental design of organization, which involves a hierarchy, which involves a certain flow of decision making, information, contribution, we kind of have to rethink all of this and say, what does it look like in a network, which allows us to capture the subtler parts of contribution as well. So like Sid was sharing, in a collective where we are able to measure contribution and also create a reputation score around it, then it also allows us to define who will have a larger say in the ecosystem or network and who will not. And hopefully we will also be able to design for a system where the power of decision making, governance, or anything else doesn't end up accumulating in a few, which is what we are seeing in our systems as of today. So I think those are some exciting possibilities that I'm really enjoying engaging on. And some of us have been having conversations, and definitely we will need, we are happy to engage with more people who have ideas and thoughts around this, because I think we are all kind of trying to expand our own imagination to truly leverage the possibility that new economy or new age organizations actually are ready to offer if we can take it.
Thanks, Pratyush. And for those who are interested, I'm trying something different with my audio. Maybe the crackling sound is dropped off. Let me know if it's not working. For those who are interested in this conversation around the Programmatic Collective, join the chat room that we'll link to the chat room that we're going to share with you. And that's a great place to actually engage and start shaping this conversation as it evolves over the next 6 months. Speaking of, let's take a question and then maybe we can come back to Rajni. Garnet, what do you think?
Yeah, sure. We have one question. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, so this is from Rishi. Reputation economies are exchanges that use other measures than just financial currency. Who would be deciding these measures? Is it Sacred Capital or the users of Sacred Capital's ecosystem?
Thanks, Rishi. Maybe Garnet can even pop you up on the screen if you'd like to be on as an answer. But like I said, reputation is fundamentally a bottom-up, ground-up, or in other words, distributed form of wealth. And so sacred capital would definitely not be the one defining how reputation is designed. All we hold is the intelligence which allows reputation to ripple back and forth across ecosystems. As I explained, apps are templates which propose a certain set of framework, but it is essentially up to the user to look at the way the app is proposing how reputation should be designed and say, well, this is not how honesty works, and this just doesn't subscribe to me. Like, this is not something I would subscribe to, and say, oh, I'm not going to stake my reputation within this ecosystem. Alternatively, you could say, users could say, well, this is actually a good measure of punctuality, like a measure of how I'm on time for my Uber rides on a regular basis. That is actually a good measure of punctuality, and so that you could say is a good measure of what punctuality is, and so therefore users who stake their reputation into it validate that, and that in a way endorses what apps propose. And so it's this dynamic between apps and users. It's almost like a bargaining of sorts that ensures how reputation is designed. And you can have several thousands of of designs of reputations which don't pick up and which actually don't get accepted, and that's fair as well. But the ones that do get accepted and endorsed actually are good measures of reputation. And for that, I would recommend, I'm not sure, I think Akash is on this call as well, but he's one of our strong analysts in this space who's been thinking about this a good deal. You can find him in our chat rooms for reputation economy architects. So I'd recommend hitting him up in the chat rooms. But fundamentally, we call this an interchange. We didn't call this an exchange because it's not a market. It's not a traditional market in the sense you can't sell one reputation for another. And that actually brings me to Rajni's point, who's on here. I'd recommend checking out her book, Bazaar's Conversations with Freedom. It's been a very deeply more inspirational book for me. When I read it 5 years ago, it speaks about how markets traditionally always woven society with commerce. And so if I walk to my neighborhood market, and I might engage in cutthroat negotiation with this vendor who's selling me tomatoes, but I'm woven with him within that social fabric. And so that removal or that split between society and culture is now being fused back in again using the exchange. And so Rajni, might please you to know that our default chat room, so when people sign into the chat room, it takes them to the common chat room. We've named it the Bazaar, and we called it the Bazaar because we think the example of a decentralized market is the Bazaar. So it's a colloquial term in Asia and Central Asia for a decentralized local market. So I think that's in one way like reinforcing certain principles with language. That's something that we've thought of. But yeah, Rajni, if you have any thoughts, feel free to share. And then you can pick up the next question after Rajni comment. Rajni, I think you're on mute.
I'm happy to listen. I have nothing. I don't want to come in as yet. I'm just excited to be part of the exercise and happy to listen.
Thank you. Ganak, let's take the next question.
Before I do that, do I need to put the answers up there, or
oh no, that's fine.
How do I?
No, that's it.
Just leave the questions there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Okay. So the next question is from Ashok Sajwan, and the question is reputation portable only between app in similar ecosystem, or is it portable across various ecosystems like porting reputation from shared mobility apps to consumer shopping app?
In that sense, that's a fascinating question, Ashok. And you will see more details released on this after this email, but essentially think of this as money or wealth, right? And so if you choose to pay $15 for a banana, that's entirely your choice. And so in that sense, this is a bit of a free market. However, we say the validity or the impact or the strength of a stake is defined by the users who agree to it. So let's take the example of Uber. If I'm a driver within the Uber ecosystem, and I think my rating as an Uber driver can be imported into Lyft or maybe Grab or maybe any other local rideshare platforms. That is up to me. Like, I can subscribe to Grab and say, yes, I agree to this stake. And if there's thousands like me who agree that this is, valid, the more people that are and the relevance of the people that agree to the stake defines the strength of that stake. Now, let's say there's, a collective of organic farmers that says, hey, we're, offering, we think you're an expert in organic food if you're a good Grab driver. That's to us, it seems absurd. But think about the dynamic there, because the Uber driver won't be willing to stake their reputation into that collective for organic food, because if he's not a great expert on organic food, any negative behavior there would actually ripple back and affect his Uber rating. So because his reputation is at stake, he's going to be very cautious and measure with where he's allowed to stake. And so in that sense, we can get into this maybe into one discussion in the chat rooms, but that's one way in which we ensure it's contextual. And so we're not staking reputations as banana connoisseurs with how well you drive a car. And in a way, we're not doing it, apps aren't doing it, but users are doing it themselves. And that is really important in the reputation economy. Let's keep going on it. I think we can take maybe 2 to 3 questions more. But yeah.
Okay. Sure. Just so you know, I think Pratush is trying to post a question, but he can't seem to post it.
You need to
in the
panelist and then post this question. And I think Maria, you might
really?
as well. So we can take that just after this. But go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, so give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next question is from, where is it? Okay, Nihal Saldana.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
You ready? Okay. Yep. So the question is, when you talk about a new economy, mm-hmm. can we expect to redefine what we understand of wealth with new fundamental metrics? Or will we continue to define it by having the latest iPhone and BMW? In the 4 tenets you mentioned, that while reputation is not fungible, it can still be monetized. Does that make the reputation economy simply a means to the same material and monetary end?
It's a good question. Nihal, thanks for asking.
Can I just come in with a supplementary here?
Sure.
As we go further down the line, how will we distinguish between reputational capital and the traditional notion of having a brand image?
Got it.
For example, what was his name? The basketball star, Michael Jordan, was able to monetize his brand equity. Now, how is that different from? I know how. I just want to hear your thoughts on how that will differ from.
Yeah. So I think, Nihal, thanks for opening up this question. Think of these as 2 parallel dimensions. We're not talking about one eating away into the other. We're not talking about one dominating and making the other irrelevant. Think of this as 2 parallel economies and formal languages for value. It's just that over the last 70 to 100 years, as a result of the industrialized revolution, we've created a formal language for material capital. Like, Sid can move from Mumbai to Singapore and his material capital reports. Like, he just showed up here in Singapore and with the swipe of a card, his material capital was porting across the world, which is pretty fantastic. However, his reputation as a distributed economy thinker, or as a good friend, or as a foodie, he had to work towards that, like call a few friends, hey, can you introduce me to a few people or tell me what's, and so that's still old school, like that's still informal. And so the purpose of the reputation economy is to balance that out and actually provide that formal economic language for this stuff, like these forms of value. I'd recommend reading some of the works of Bernard Lietaer, who's known as I think he's known as the architect of the euro, but he talks about the yin and yang of wealth. And so we've actually created formal economic languages for material wealth, which is a very masculine, technical, transactional form of value. But there's other kinds of value which are also important, which are restorative, rebalancing, caring, nurturing. And in order to rebalance those, we need the benefits of formal economic language for reputation. And so to your question, I think it is, in that sense, personally, I think it is up to that each individual themselves to ensure what is that balance of their yin and yang in their lives. Personally, is one of my practices. I've been considering a creative constraint where I cap my material capital at a certain level and actually hold a majority of my wealth in reputation. Because you almost hold potential. It's kind of like potential energy that you hold in reputation, which could be monetized at various points based on need and based on relevance. So to answer your question, Rajni, in a way, we're formalizing this concept of a brand. Like Sid today could be known as a distributed economy thinker, and he could monetize it by starting a consultancy service. But of course, that consultancy service needs to be relevant. He can't, start and practice as a dentist and expect to monetize it. And so we call this contextual chaos because that contextual aspect allows it to be formalized in a very relevant way. But yeah, Nihal, to your question, I think that balance is up to people. I actually think some of the damage that we've been seeing to the planet at large is because we haven't had a formal economy for other stuff. I think most people today don't have need for material capital beyond a certain point, but you hold large masses of material capital because you wish to influence the future of society. And so reputation economies allow us to hold that same influence, but without necessarily funding coal mines. That's my thought. I think there's a lot to be unpacked there as well, and I think it can make for good, fascinating discussions. Next question, Ghana.
Okay, so we have one question from Mihir. How is reputation modeled? Oh, sorry. Pardon?
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was just...
Oh. What's that?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so Mihir asks this question. How is reputation modeled algorithmically within the current sacred capital holo infrastructure? And then reputation is a function of what parameters per se?
Can we pop Mihir over? Because it'd be nice to interact with him. But thanks for asking us, Mihir. I know you've been interested in this as a reputation economy architect. And I know it's pretty late where you are. It's probably past midnight right now. So really appreciate you staying up so late.
Yeah.
But effectively, like I said, apps or Genesis entrepreneurs will make a proposal for what they think reputation can be. And the objective here is to have as many diverse designs for reputation as possible. With traditional wealth, homogeneity is important. Like in material capital, it's important for me to know, okay, if Mihir is worth $10 million, that means, it's 7 billion pounds, which means it's 13 million Singapore dollars or a million rupees. It's all homogeneous, like it's all on one linear scale. But with reputation, you actually want to encourage diverse scale. So you want to encourage, someone might want to create a scale, a spectrum. Someone else might design reputation as binary. Someone else might design reputation as integers or whole numbers, or positive and negative spectrum. You want to give entrepreneurs the freedom to design this and to play with this. And the reputation exchange celebrates this diversity. So you don't need to comply with Uber's form of rating. because now you have an interchange. And so if there's validity in it, you can actually say, well, I don't like Uber star rating. I'd like to create a binary rating, like either a good driver or a bad driver. And here are my rules for what is a good driver or a bad driver. And if there's validity in it, users subscribe to it, then it can be accepted in thousands and millions of cases. So I think that answers your question to some extent. But
right, it does.
I would like you to ask this more. And I think this, it's almost like our intention in the next 6 months is to actually have much more nuanced conversations around this. So guys like you potentially who want to be reputation economy architects are studying this and analyzing this before going over to entrepreneurs and just, freewheeling. And so that's our intention. So, which is why we
perhaps
like being a new economy analyst. Sorry, go ahead.
Perhaps a more technically oriented chat room would be a great place to start off.
Yeah. So Akash, who's also on the call, is going to be doing some of that, and so I'd recommend joining that chat room, the Reputation Economy Architect chat room, and populating your questions. And as you grow, and as Pratyusha, as you own reputation within the ecosystem, you actually then move on to moderating, to hosting, to guiding other reputation economy architects. And as you own this reputation within the ecosystem, other Genesys entrepreneurs will therefore look at that as a measure of, well, Mihir is 5-star rated, he's very nuanced, and therefore I would like to actually work with him. And that's how we're building this out. So yeah, watch your inbox, because right after this interaction, we'll send over an email with an action plan. But yeah, let's take, Maria, do you have a question? I know. Thanks, Maria. Maria, are you on? Do you want to pop your question right now? I don't think we can hear.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Hey, Maria, how are you doing?
You can. Great. I hope you hear me now.
Yes.
Yeah. So I saw in the Q&A also from Vishal Modi. He also posted as a Genesys entrepreneur, how do I connect to and specific steps do I need to take to build my distributed app? So he actually posted my question. So yeah, I would like to hear more about that.
Nice. Maria.
Sid.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sid.
Yeah.
I think there might be a slight crossover with Pratyusha's question. I'm not sure, but I'm going to just read his out as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So Pratyusha's question is a common question that comes up for interested folks. What outlook, knowledge, or skills do I need to have to engage and contribute to the ecosystem? If possible, will be lovely to hear some general thoughts on this. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think everyone on this call has participated in interactions before, and they've been like, well, give us some tangible steps, and these tangible steps are here. And so, like I said, watch for your inbox. So if you are a Genesys entrepreneur, we're going to be releasing a set of documents and web pages. And so it's going to be a more detailed set of resources on the reputation economy, what you can do as a Genesys entrepreneur, what you can do as a funder. And then the next step from there is joining chat rooms. And so we're going to have a dedicated room for Genesys entrepreneurs. And that's step 2, because that's where you can actually get in, start asking tangible questions, start populating your ideas. And as an idea grows, we actually start creating conversations around it. So the next step from there is then creating another chat room, then inviting people who might be interested in that. And then that goes on to conversations, like interactions like these, where you feature 4 to 5 Genesys entrepreneurs at a time, so that you can attract people within the ecosystem as well to start contributing to your projects. But that's, the action plan, like we said, is for you to utilize Sacred Capital for our intellectual resources and different connections within the ecosystem. And I would recommend that you take like a 6-month time frame more for designing what you want to create, because like I said, you're thinking across dimensions. This isn't about, here's my idea, I'm going to implement it this is how I'm going to use Reputation, because I actually think there'll be a lot of things that pop into the horizon, over the horizon in the next 6 months, and so you're much better off in being in design phase, in conversation phase, and then moving to other aspects of actually executing. And yeah, so maybe we can end it on that note since we're running out of time. Unless, yeah, I think Kanak, what do you think? Should we wrap up? I think let's.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we've gone over by 5 minutes.
But yeah, the intention and the invitation is for you to start engaging in these tangible ways. And if you have any questions, start interacting with us on the platforms that we spoke about. So a big thank you first to Garnet, because she stepped up and offered her services as the guest host last evening. So I'm really grateful.
Thank you.
I think it's a great initiative to just have more diverse voices in the ecosystem. A big thank you to you guys who are awake at really odd hours. I know Maria, it's probably 5 a.m. where you are, and some of the other guys on the East Coast who are up pretty late. And for everyone else who joined and shaped this conversation with your inputs, this is, we're really looking forward to the next 6 months of us collectively building this out together. So yeah, thank you. We're going to share a recording of this post the event, and also look out for an email in your inbox with more details. Thank you guys. Look forward to more of these over time. Bye.